Go ahead, David.
So the 49ers are staggering, fresh off a 28-18 loss against the defending Super Bowl champions. They're 3-4, and Tim, I think that we look at this and they're like a boxer that's on the ropes, and they're about 10 seconds to go before they can get to the end of the round. And the end of the round is standing in between them and the end of the round are the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday. If the 49ers can get through this next game, find a win, then they have a bye week and they're 4-4, and everything is at least set up to work out better for them. But if they lose this week coming up, then it's going to start to give real 2020 vibes. And
yeah, and with the trade deadline coming up to November 5, so they'll be on their bye week, and then going into next week, that's when the trade deadline comes in. Pretty interesting time. We know they like to be active at the trade deadline, though we're not quite sure which way they might go. But the Cowboys are coming off a bye, much like the Chiefs were, but they're staggering too, right? They're just getting knocked around. Possibly no Micah Parsons again on Sunday. Obviously, someone who has given the 49ers fits in the past. I don't know that they know for sure if Parsons is going to play, but if he's not there, it's going to be two wounded teams just trying to survive. Hold on. Maybe the Cowboys are a little fresher because of the bye week, but the 49ers are going to be a little angry. I think they're pissed off. I think obviously losing to the Chiefs for the 5th straight time in the way they did it. Again, I thought they would play their best game against the Chiefs. That did not happen. They played one of their worst games against the Chiefs, I think. Brock Purdy certainly did. But you and I have seen these 49ers rally back from stuff like this. Maybe it isn't in them this time. We know the injuries they've got. We know Ayuk is out for the season. I guess, there's still questions about whether Debo can make it back for Sunday. Jawan Jennings still has to be a question mark. It might be Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing, and who knows, but they should be able to win this game. David, do you feel that they still should be able to scrap together something enough offense? I think the defense played fine except for a couple of moments against Mahomes last Sunday, but against Mahomes, 49ers should be able to put together something against the Cowboys. If they don't, then that's when we do the dramatic reassessment of this season.
Well, they were 3-5 in 2021, and then they were 3-4. Same exact situation in 2022 as far as schedule and the loss that got them to 3-4. They lost the Chiefs at home in Week 7 to drop to 3-4. The way they turned it around from both of those losing starts was with a game against the Rams. They had get-well games against the Rams in 2021, 31-10. They won Monday night at Levi's, and then after losing to the Chiefs in 2022, they went down to SoFi and they beat the Rams 31-14. That was the McCaffrey game where he threw for a touchdown, ran for a touchdown, and caught a touchdown. So in the Shanahan era, typically games against the Rams, and it's ironic because the Rams did beat them in that NFC Championship in 2021, but regular season games against the Rams had been the get-well medicine for the 49ers. I see some parallels with the Cowboys because the 49ers have always played the Cowboys well. They haven't lost to them outside of that 2020 season after they got good under Kyle Shanahan. I know they lost to them in 2017. I'm not really counting that right now. That's before they had that QB in place. But recently, a couple times in the postseason, in the regular season last year was a blowout. The 49ers seem to – I just don't think that Dallas does well with teams that like to run straight at them. And the 49ers have been able to run straight at Dallas, and they were able to run straight at the Rams in 2021 and 2022 when they turned things around. So I view this as an opportunity for the 49ers to go back to the basics, try to simplify things. I know it's tough because the Chiefs really were able to disrupt Brock Purdy's timing with his receivers on the back end. And when the 49ers were down all those eligible players, that ended up being a recipe from hell, kind of like the season from hell that you wrote about a couple weeks ago.
I keep writing about it.
Yeah. So you're going to keep on writing about this until the 49ers can get back to the basics, simplify things, and just – again, I use the boxing analogy because they have to get to that break. They have to hear that bell ring and get to the break because on the other side of the break, they may be getting Christian McCaffrey back, and that could help solve a lot of the issues they're seeing in separation right now.
It's all related, right? I mean, we can keep talking about McCaffrey. There's no question they miss him. I've been theorizing for a couple of weeks now that, he's so good that I think Kyle Shanahan might have adjusted his scheme a little, or at least his tendencies. I want to do this because I got Christian McCaffrey. Why wouldn't you? And I think he might be having a hard time kind of getting it back into the old school way of that he used to do it. They're not running the ball real well. Jordan Mason's been fantastic, way better than anyone could expect for a guy that was kind of banging around for a couple of years and kind of wins the number 2 job last season. But you didn't really need a number 2 running back when you got McCaffrey. And now he's a number 1. He's getting 75, 80 yards a game, but he's not the receiving threat. Clearly, Purdy doesn't. Like, there are times I'm seeing him. He's like, okay, just throw it to him, and he doesn't do it. There obviously he's not Christian McCaffrey, and he's not, no one's going to produce 130, 140 yards a game combined the way McCaffrey does. I mean, it's just, and a touchdown plus and 7 first downs and all those things. Mason has been as good as they possibly could have imagined. But I think you talk about the red zone, you talk about not getting off, not getting the third down conversions, about all these things that is bugging this offense. Now you can put the injuries absolutely beyond McCaffrey, now Ayuk. But I think the number one big picture thing is they're not running the ball, and they can't run the ball. And if defenses don't have to do much to stop that, or 8-man fronts, but I don't think they're that worried about anybody going over the top of them. It just changes who the 49ers can be, and we're seeing it. 18 points against the Chiefs. The red zone struggles throughout the season. It's just running the ball sets things up for the Shanahan offense, and they're just not running the ball right now.
And it's about, you talked about Mason. Yeah, he's picked up some yardage on the ground, but they're not getting 1 yard when they need 1 yard. And I don't think it's Jordan Mason's fault most of the time. The interior, especially with Jake Brendel there in the middle, was getting blasted on those 3rd and 1s.
Well, how they got their running first downs last game was Brock Purdy. They went 3rd and 1, he snuck it. They went 4th and 1, he snuck it. I think they were 3rd and 2 when he snuck it. That is not something Kyle Shanahan wants to do all the time. Certainly never did it much with. Oh, actually, he did with Garoppolo. Garoppolo's pretty good at it, but he wants to turn around, hand a running back, and power it through. And
in a standard way too. With the quarterback sneak, they had to pull both guards. It was almost a trick play that they ran. And that's when Shanahan is starting to have to resort to stuff like that in the red zone. That he is acknowledging that personnel wise, he's weaker there in the middle. It's going to be interesting because John Feliciano keeps on tweeting or posting on Instagram that he's really close to coming back. I think he posted a emoji of a couple clocks, so indicating that it's time. Feliciano's a guy that ended up, he started the Super Bowl last year at right guard. He obviously didn't finish the game, but he's played center before. And the 49ers have made in-season changes along the line before. Last year, they needed to at right guard. That's why Feliciano took over for Burford, but then he got hurt. I do wonder if the 49ers do look for a boost along that interior, because how that game started, Tim, on Sunday. The first run was stuffed. Shanahan wanted to go back to the basics. It was 3 runs in a row. Second run was a productive gain from Jake Brendel, but it was a holding penalty. A productive gain from Jordan Mason, but it was a holding penalty on Jake Brendel. And immediately the 49ers were behind the sticks. And immediately that game, got off to exactly the start you can't have it get off on, because Kansas City wasn't behind the sticks, at least penalty-wise. They didn't commit a single offensive penalty that game.
Are you ever behind the sticks when you got 15 at quarterback? Either, by the way. I don't know if you 3rd and 20, maybe 3rd and 20, and even then, what was it? 3rd and 18 in the Super Bowl in Miami? It was something like that.
It was 18. It was 3rd and 18. Obviously, broken coverage. Whatever happened, he found Tyreek
You
Hill.
Never get behind the sticks when you have Patrick Mahomes. That's my new theory, my new declaration. Breaking news: he's good. And he was good. He threw 2 picks, and he still was dominating the game on Sunday. Still dominated that game.
Well, it was actually, what's crazy? It's the lowest passer rating of his career, but at the very critical junctures, the Chiefs got it done and the 49ers weren't able to get it done. So you talk about the 33-yard run where he eludes Fred Warner, and then, D. Winters probably was worried about picking up a personal foul. Pretty sure that Dre Greenlaw in that same situation wouldn't have cared. He would have blasted Mahomes anyway, and it probably would have been the right way to handle it for the 49ers. But obviously that they were playing that equation in their head. And then Kansas City went 8 of 14 on 3rd down, and the 49ers before garbage time were 1 of 10 on 3rd down. Mm-hmm. So, that's, both quarterbacks delivered the worst rating of their NFL careers, but on one side, the very most important junctures were executed, and on the other side, they weren't. And then after the game, we saw Kyle Shanahan in the locker room 5 minutes or so talking to Brock Purdy. And, Kyle tried to downplay that yesterday, Tim. He's like, yeah, I do that all the time. You guys just happen to be watching. I don't buy that. He doesn't do it all the time.
No.
He knows that the media is there, and he knows that he could talk to the players for 23 other hours of the day when the media is not just there watching. So that was interesting. Both you and I noticed that, and it was Kyle and Brock Purdy having a conversation there for about 5 to 6 minutes after the game.
Yeah, there's a question. Michael Silvers will just bring it right out. He mentions is, he says, "Is there much ado about this whole Shanahan and Purdy in the locker room post game?" It depends on your interpretation. It's fair interpretation. I was there, you were there. I was as close as anybody without trying to eavesdrop, just trying to watching it. It is occurring. Kyle Shanahan gets out of his press conference. He does this long walk right from the press conference through the locker room, takes the right hand turn into the coach's locker room, and Purdy's locker is right there. Stops. Purdy's mostly putting his shoes on after he's changed, and they stand there and they have a talk for as you said, 5 or 6 minutes. Didn't seem like agitated, although we
No.
couldn't see. Kyle was facing away. He's facing towards the locker. Purdy's facing out, so we see Purdy's reactions, and Brock is not a emotive guy, but he was just kind of like listening and nodding his head, and they were kind of doing like, if you do this, they're doing that kind of thing. But I think it was pointed. I think Shanahan, I wrote about it. I think Shanahan knew everybody was watching. He understood that this was something that was going to be discussed. But if it was a terrible, John Lynch wandered out of the coach's office that's where he is post game, went across, got food in the post game food, and then came wander right back. And then he kind of stopped and he kind of laughed with them and he pointed to the media. And that's when they kind of both looked around and they laughed. That's not what happens when it's a tirade, right? That doesn't happen if there's tension. I just think it was an interesting discussion to watch that Kyle rarely has. Kyle will stop and he'll talk with Debo. I see him talking with Debo all the time post game. If Trent's there, he'll stop with Trent. Maybe Christian, whatever. Like those guys, he'll stop. It's down that right side of the locker room, which David and I know very well. And those are kind of the guys along that side. Debo's kind of on the left side, but as Kyle walks through, he'll walk past Debo's locker. It's just interesting that it was such a long one. It wasn't 45 seconds of, hey, we'll get him next time. It looked like Kyle was kind of doing, when you see this, go over here. When it was more kind of technical, maybe, I don't know. And I just think Purdy gave us a hint about what it was about when I asked him, like, you're losing all your guys. Do you feel like you have more responsibility on this offense? And Purdy, who is not an anecdotal talker, right? David, he does not like give you free metaphors. Said, do I feel like I need to put on a Superman cape? No, that's not what I'm supposed to do. I think that might have come right from Kyle or someone telling him, don't overdo this. It's not on you to make this all about yourself. It's on you to distribute the way you've been doing, even if you don't have your guys. Run the system, believe in the system, and that's what he's done best. Now he's done it best with Christian McCaffrey and Brandon Ayuk, and we know the things that they don't have right now. But I think that's probably what it was more about. It was more about, hey, I understand you're pressing. I understand there are things out there that you want to do and you can't do because you don't have your best guys, but don't force it. That first pick was one of the worst throws I've ever seen Brock throw. It was just like I'm throwing it. He's rarely throwing an interception when he's set, looking, boom. It's more under pressure, and he just tries to fling it out there. This was like a set foot. I'm looking this way, throw, and he throws it right to the defensive back. I think maybe it was, I got to get this there. I got to do something, and they want to kind of take that out. Don't need to do that. Maybe you might have to do it if they play the Chiefs again, but again, it doesn't work out so well. They shouldn't need that against the Cowboys, probably against Tampa. We'll see these next few games. They just need Purdy to feel calm within the system, and I think that's what the conversation was.
Well, and especially that was the second drive of the game. It was after 3 straight runs. I think it was obvious what the 49ers were trying to do. They were trying to run 3 times and then set up a play action, but the 3 runs didn't yield a first down. So the play action came on the first play of the second drive, and Kansas City just stayed home on the play action. They didn't bite the running action, which is why it's so important to get opposing defenses to respect your run game. And it's harder to do that when the blocking hasn't been there, and obviously Christian McCaffrey is currently not involved with what the 49ers are doing offensively. And when Purdy sees the defense not bite on the play action, that's the play that Shanahan probably told him after that game. And I think Purdy knew as soon as he threw it, throw it away. That you're rolling to your right, you're outside the tackle box, or at least make sure you're outside the tackle box and chuck that one up into the second row of the stands. It's okay if the defense has it sniffed out. You're at midfield. That was coming right off of the
The
fake
pick.
punt that
Oh,
the
fake punt. That's right.
49ers,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, they had the fake punt that they stopped. So they had great field position. They had momentum. It was tied. It was scoreless. There was no reason to push it downfield. So that's the type of mistake you don't normally see. I don't know if we've ever seen Purdy make that kind of mistake. When he forces the ball into picks, it's normally been when he has been trying to play hero ball when they're behind.
Yep.
But the down and distance in
All
the
the
game
Ravens.
situation is usually something that he has a really good grasp of, and he didn't on that one. Then later on, we weren't sure if it was going to be on Ronnie Bell or if it was on Brock Purdy, but unequivocally, the 49ers said that it was Purdy who threw to the wrong spot and Bell ran to the right spot. And the last pick, that's the one where there was a lot going on as far as Colton McKivitz just getting beaten on the spin move by George Karlaftis. So Purdy got hit as he threw. I don't know where he was trying to go with the ball or if he was just trying to throw it out of bounds at that point. But
He was trying.
I
I
mean,
think he
that
was
was a
trying to hit
breakdown
Kittle.
on a number
Yeah,
of levels.
he was trying to hit Kittle, trying to force it. He was trying to jam it in there, and did not make it.
And
All
there's
right, we got
nobody open on that play. Like there was no
no,
separation,
no.
which I think is
Let's take some
illustrated.
questions.
This is the crossroads they're at, Tim. They're in that game. They're down 4 of their top 5 skill weapons, right? So you've got rookies like Pearsall and Jacob Cowing with big roles, and if Purdy's a timing quarterback, it's going to be hard to get that timing right, especially on the fly. They were anticipating a much smaller role for Ricky Pearsall,
Oh yeah,
turned into a
way.
huge role for Ricky Pearsall. So, I mean, these are things they've got to figure out now on the fly. There's not going to be Brandon Ayuk, no Christian McCaffrey in all likelihood this week. So, guys like Pearsall, guys like Cowing, Chris Conley, obviously Kittle. I mean, they're going to have to find that timing with Purdy. And again, I go back to the metaphor. They have to find a way to make it work this week, and then hopefully, for their sake, things get easier after the bye week.
All right, let's take some questions. Dave, you got some there?
I'm ready. Yeah, the questions are filtering in here through the Q&A. By the way, if you want to ask a question, we'll try to get to most of them here. We have a couple thank yous. Is there somebody asked if there's that's the one that so
Yep.
it's Michael Silvers, not Mike Silver.
Yeah, not Mike.
I
It
thought you were
might be.
referring to Mike Silver when you're
Might be
talking
Mike.
about
Might be Mike Silver too. Who knows? He might be jumping on.
that. It's typical that a bad Brock game generates annoying storylines. But how many of these kinds of showings would it take for Kyle to rethink the quarterback position? Or is that totally out of the question? Come on, that's. I mean, of course, if he has 5 straight showings like this, you rethink the quarterback position. But we have data on Purdy now. We have the 2022 season, the 2023 season, the first several games of this 2024 season. We're not going to relitigate whether or not Brock Purdy is a good quarterback based on one game. I mean, Brady had bad games, Manning had bad games, Montana had bad games. This is again, it's one game, and I think that Purdy, Tim, has uh, developed a certain benefit of the doubt. He's earned a certain benefit of the doubt at this point that he can overcome poor games and move forward into better ones.
If they didn't have Brock Purdy, by whatever way it happens, they would be desperately trying to get the next Brock Purdy. There's just no question. I saw Mike Sando, who I really respect at the Athletic, former colleague of both of ours, just kind of, I think, had an executive extension. Well, maybe they should just trade Purdy. It's like if they traded Purdy, they would just want Brock Purdy back because this is the perfect quarterback for Kyle Shanahan. They're, maybe if they had Sam Darnold, but even then they're not getting him. Whatever. It just no, that's not happening. If it happened, maybe this game happened against a bad defense, you think about maybe like, okay, 1 or 2 or more would be bad. That would happen against a great defense. Chiefs are a great defense, have done it before. I would ask more questions about Steve Spagnuolo throwing another hex on a Shanahan offense. This is now, many, many times has happened, and you think Kyle would have some sort of answers for it. I know the weapons aren't there, but that's interesting. You have to go through the Chiefs maybe for the final game. That's not a great feeling for the 49ers and that Steve Spagnuolo's defense is just each up every time, and he did it again.
Well, and Spagnuolo runs a super blitz heavy defense. He's very aggressive with the blitzes. I've been watching a little bit of tape, and there was an incompletion to Ayuk on a little slant, so maybe a skinny post there that never really had time to develop because there was 2 free rushers coming in, and it seems to me that the Chiefs break a lot of the 49ers protection rules. And
Yep.
this was an issue in the Super Bowl in the 3rd and 4 where he tried to go to to Jennings, and it didn't work out. I don't know what happened with the Burford. I think it was just the Burford screw up there
Yeah,
in
blocked the wrong
overtime
guy.
at the end. But there were in the Super Bowl, Tim, there were 9 unblocked pressures against Brock Purdy, and there were some unblocked pressures like the one I just mentioned with 2 guys where he didn't have a chance. So to me, this is a chess match, and right now Steve Spagnuolo is consistently ahead of Kyle Shanahan in that chess match. He's bringing the type of pressure that the 49ers aren't blocking, and then the way that you beat unblocked pressures to have really good timing on the other end between your quarterback and receiver, and obviously that wasn't there for the 49ers against the Chiefs. So something has to happen. I do think that you have to run the ball more effectively because that diffuses some of the pressure, puts the game more on your terms. But I do look back at a play like Brandon Ayuk's drop in that game as a huge play where things really swung against the 49ers, because with a timing offense, you need rhythm. And if you're not converting the chances that you have to pick up first downs on third down, that was one of 10 for the 49ers, then you're not going to develop that rhythm. And it's all connected, right? Run and pass are all connected. And a rhythm-based offense did not find its way into rhythm, and that's a disaster against an aggressive defense like the one that Steve Spagnuolo is bringing.
Got to run the ball. I know it's hard to run against the Chiefs, but you got to run the ball. They better run the ball against the Cowboys on Sunday and for the rest of the season. All right, Lucas has got a question.
Yep.
Which position would you address if you could make one trade before the deadline? David, what position do you think they're looking at?
Well, I think it'd be great if the 49ers could get a center, if they could improve the interior offensive line, but that's not realistic.
They don't they don't trade
But
for offensive linemen except for unless they're Trent Williams.
yeah, exactly. And it's just in general, there's such a shortage of offensive linemen. You look at the supply and demand of the market at different positions. There's a low supply of offensive linemen. There's generally a surplus of defensive linemen, which is why the 49ers have traded for defensive linemen in most of these seasons. If they could have acquired a better linebacker than Devondre Campbell over the offseason, I think they would have. They tried to go for Eric Kendricks, but he signed with the Cowboys at the last minute instead. So that's who they're playing this week. I think that the most realistic position for the 49ers to acquire is the defensive line. And you can never have too many of those guys. You can always strengthen that position. I don't think they've been bad. Thought we saw an awesome play from Kalia Davis. I think the Nick Bosa's been a force. Bosa would probably argue that there should have been a couple holding calls in that game against the Chiefs. They obviously didn't get them, but you can continue strengthening that position because it is, especially the way the 49ers run their defense, it's surefire to get you results. If you can increase the stamina of that defensive line, both against the run and just pass rushing fuel, that's what gets this defense going.
Yeah, they got to look at receivers. I mean, they're going to look at everything. I asked Shanahan about it after the game on Sunday because we look at everything, and they always do. I don't know the receivers where they're going to get the upgrade. Cooper Kupp, athletic.
DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah. DeAndre Hopkins is an interesting one because that won't take very much, and it's not from a division rival. Cooper Kupp, even if he's traded, I don't think the Rams are picking up John
Interested
Lynch's
in
call on that one, and it would cost a lot. The cap squeeze would be tough. They're ready. They're still down to be paying these big deals to Debo and Ayuk. I just don't. It's a tough one. They are always up for a defensive lineman, right? They are always up for that. They traded for 2 of them last year, Randy Gregory, nothing, and then Chase Young, who was not terrible, ups and downs, but he was a pretty good player in a Super Bowl. I think they would be calling on a player like that. I think they would love Max Crosby from the Raiders, but again, another team that is not trading with the 49ers. I think there's a couple like Trey Hendrickson, but the Bengals are not out of it. They're 3-4, same record as the 49ers. I don't think they're dumping anything, and he's a great player. Zadarius Smith has been mentioned. I could see, that's kind of a guy you plug in for 8 games and see what he gets you. Maybe takes you into the playoffs, makes a couple big plays in the playoffs. There are other guys. I think they'd give up a first round pick for a really good guy. For a Zadarius Smith might be more like a third rounder. There are other possibilities out there. And I was like, hey, Kayvon Thibodeau would fit that rush end opposite Bosa, but he's hurt. He probably isn't going to be traded. Those sorts of names, I think, would be the ones they're calling on. We've seen it in the past, kind of like these high talent guys. They think they could plop into Chris Kaceric's system, have Kaceric coach the hell out of them, and run them opposite Nick Bosa. I just don't know who exactly is going to be available. But given the 49ers' tendencies, which is to load up, keep loading on the defensive line, and we know they've suffered injuries where they're not. We know the backups are not quite the ones they had planned to be. I would say if I'm going to bet on a position for them to acquire, it'd be a defensive lineman, and they might acquire two of them. They just love acquiring these guys, throw them in the mix. You know they get hurt. You know you need depth there. I'm looking for them to acquire at least one defensive end.
So that transitions to the question: how are they going to approach this receiver position now without Brandon Ayuk at that all-important X receiver spot? I think that Juwan Jennings is a legitimate candidate
Yep.
to play the X. Typically, they want a little bit more speed out of that position, but he's such a good separator. We saw it against the Rams. I mean, we've seen it through his whole career. There was a time, too, it shocked a lot of people, Tim, a couple years ago, when Shanahan was asked who the best separator is on the team. Everybody thought he'd say Brandon Ayuk, and he said Juwan Jennings. Speed does not necessarily correlate with separation ability as far as straight line speed. It's body movement. It's just the technical mastery of what's going on. So I think that Jennings might be ready to graduate to that X spot. Deebo Samuel's his own guy. Deebo Samuel's a bulldozer. He's a special weapon. He gives the 49ers a change of pace. But if you're looking just at pure receiving skill set, it might be Juwan Jennings who moves into that position if the 49ers don't make a trade for a pure X. Now, Chris Conley's a pure X, but he's more of a depth piece. Maybe this week, as the 49ers are just trying to recover from the shock of losing Ayuk and potentially losing Deebo Samuel. He was still in the hospital, I know, last night, pneumonia. But maybe this week they do just move Conley up into that X spot, and Juwan Jennings has to play the Z if Deebo Samuel's unable to go. But it's going to be really interesting to see where those rookies, right, Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing, are able to make an imprint, because they're there's a reason why they paid Brandon Ayuk all that money. That's a really, really important position to ensure that not just the X produces, but so everybody else has the appropriate space to work with in a timing offense. And right now, there is a lot of uncertainty. There is talent there to potentially fill some of these roles, but I don't know exactly how it's going to fall. And I don't think Kyle Shanahan does either. It's really a time, and George Kittle said it best. He said football's a land of opportunity. They're going to see who steps up, and if they feel that they're going to be a little bit shorthanded anyway, even with the guys in the room, that's where a move for somebody like DeAndre Hopkins might happen. I wouldn't be surprised if he wanted out of Tennessee. I think they're 1-5 at this point.
Yeah, and familiar front offices, but I think it just now if Debo can make it back for Sunday or into the future, he's going to be there. I think it makes sense. Jennings as the X, Debo is the other one, and then the rookies give him a shot as the third receiver. I think Pearsall was drafted with the idea that he could play early in the slot, and Jacob Cowing looks like a slot, and not a typical Shanahan slot, but a typical NFL slot. You can move within the numbers and maybe break one tackle and get a 50-yard gain. We saw him get open on the deep one on Sunday. We'll see. I think they want to see what those guys can do. They drafted them for a reason. They've got them both now. They played on Sunday. Neither one of them embarrassed themselves. I thought Pearsall was fine. I thought Cowing looked dangerous. And you got to see what they got, and thinking that Jennings is going to play Sunday and they're hoping that Debo plays Sunday, then those two guys can be 3 and 4. Can they be 1 and 2? Then they'd be in some trouble, but they're not likely to be 1 and 2 through most of the season, unless there are more injuries. And God knows, what do I always tell you, David? There always could be more injuries.
Yeah.
You never know.
There will be more injuries.
Yeah.
We saw the Tampa Bay game last night. Godwin, that was terrible, has to leave in the air cast. But it just shows you this is a battle of attrition. The Pearsall pick, I never thought it was redundant, because I thought that, everybody was saying that it was redundant. It was like they're playing a video game with the injuries turned off. It doesn't work that way. You've got your guys are going to get hurt. You just saw it with Brandon Ayuk. He did get hurt. Deebo Samuel's in the hospital. I mean, you have to layer depth in the NFL to make it through these marathons. And now the 49ers will test how good their layered depth is. We got Dom asking a question. Maybe it's Big Dom from Philadelphia.
Wants to know.
49ers fan here.
Yeah.
Have the 49ers purchased insurance on Ayuk and Hargrave contracts? If so, what would the credit back look like? I'll double check on this to know for sure, but they have typically purchased salary cap insurance on their contracts. This goes back to D Ford, where they actually got a few $1 million back on the salary cap that ended up being a credit on the cap. So it would shock me, especially with Javon Hargrave, an older player who was on his third contract when the 49ers signed him, if they didn't purchase insurance there. We will know exactly what kind of credit they get back next season. And Brandon Ayuk, that's a huge deal as well. That was $30 million a year on average. So I would be very, very surprised the 49ers did not purchase some salary cap insurance, which is becoming a more and more common thing around the league. Some teams don't purchase insurance, but the 49ers are one of the teams that has participated in that. And you almost have to if you've got so many big contracts on the books. And then you've got the Purdy one looming in the future. You have to make sure you protect yourself so you have enough
It's
breathing
smart,
room.
and
Yeah.
that would be something that a cheaper owner won't do. And Jed York has mostly paid. I pointed that out. He has paid up, way past many others, cash out of hand with these bonuses. Sometimes he hasn't paid up for some other things at the margins. On this, I believe this is a Prague thing, and Prague is damn smart. And to convince or agree with Jed York that you need to take insurance out, and they don't get the whole thing back. They don't get, it depends on what money they put down on the insurance. There is a premium on that, but they're going to get some of it back. That's their tendency, is to put insurance down and get a percentage of these contracts back on the cap relief. So they're going to have a little more cap room next season. That's what it's going to turn out to be. You want the player, absolutely want the player healthy, but if you are smart enough to get some insurance, you get some relief going into next season.
Jack has a really astute comment. This is something that I've wanted to talk about for a while, and I just have never had the opportunity, but this is good. He says, Mike Silver's book, not to be confused with Michael Silver's, who's commenting today, but Mike Silver, singular, Mike Silver's book that just came out is great and made me realize people have it wrong about Kyle's quarterbacks. Everyone says it should be so easy when really playing quarterback for Kyle seems incredibly hard. I could not agree more. And it's not because Kyle Shanahan makes it harder to play quarterback in the league. I just hate the generalization that for some reason there's one coach in the league who makes it easy for his quarterbacks. One of the toughest jobs in sports is to play QB in the NFL, and there's nowhere where it's easy. And I think there was always this thought, oh, you could just plug anybody into a Shanahan system and they're going to be good. And Tim, time and time again,
Yep.
that was proven to be wrong. I mean, we watched this team in 2017 with Brian Hoyer and CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins, and then they finally got a capable guy in Jimmy Garoppolo, and it looked a whole lot better. Then Garoppolo got hurt, and the 49ers went to 4-12. So, and now, what Purdy has done has been even more efficient than what Jimmy Garoppolo was able to do before his ACL tear there in 2018. I think that the results are clear, yet that same generalization still lives on, that somehow, some way it's easy to play quarterback under Kyle Shanahan. It's not easy to play quarterback anywhere in the NFL. This is a really, really hard job. And I think that a lot of people, again, if I'm going to go back to the video game analogy, a lot of people think it's as easy as dropping back and hitting a button and the ball's going to go for a big completion. It just isn't that. That's just not reality. So I think that's a really good point from Jack.
Yeah, I just like when you say system quarterback, do you realize that this system is really complicated and it's very successful? So if you can succeed in this with everything that's flying around, you're pretty good to great. And he's doing it better than anybody. Matt Ryan in 2016, although Matt Ryan struggled a little bit in 2015. The book is really good about that. MVP in 2016 under Kyle, then Kyle comes to the 49ers. And then Purdy's been way better than anybody, including Jimmy, that Kyle has played with the 49ers, whoever's been out there. So I just think it gets in people's head. Their ideas come out there, storylines that they can't get away from. But you just can't plug in another quarterback here and expect the same stuff. Sam Darnold, grew because he was learning from the Shanahan system. Look what he's turned into. He's not an incredible quarterback, but he's a good one. And that is part of what he learned. He didn't just okay, it's easy now, I did the Kyle thing. It's hard to figure it out. But once you pick up some of the schematics, some of the things you need to do, some of the reads, I think you do become a little bit better quarterback. And we're seeing it in Darnold. And again, I keep saying with Purdy, if they didn't have Brock Purdy, they would be desperately trying to find the next Brock Purdy. And it was hard to find this one because it was this last pick of the draft and they didn't even know they had him until a few months into it.
Those of you who are watching on our other streams, I know there's some on Twitter, some on YouTube. If you want to ask a question, go to either of our Twitters and you'll see the link to the San Francisco Standard. We're doing this for the Standard. It's a live Q&A. So that's the mechanism for asking questions. You can go find the link and watch it through there. I know that this is going to get to a bigger audience, and maybe there are people asking questions elsewhere. But if you want your questions answered, just like Dom, Jose, we're going to answer Jose's question next. Michael Silvers, if you want your question answered, just like those
multiple
guys,
silver. It's the multiple
then
silvers.
yeah, the multiple silvers. There's two of them now. If you want your questions answered just like all these people, then make sure you go to the San Francisco Standard's live broadcast link, which we have on both of our Twitters. Anyway, Jose's question. This is again we're going to circle back to the trade stuff, but worth talking about. How would the 49ers needs? How would the 49ers meet their needs prior to the trade deadline? It seems like they have a lot of positions that need attention. I'm going to answer this more from a general standpoint, Tim. Whenever a team is playing poorly, and obviously they're 3-4 right now, so this is not up to their standard. I think it might seem that they have more problems than they actually have because it's like a puzzle, right? And complementary football is a real thing. Like, and if you're not playing complementary football, then say that there's a defensive deficiency, it's going to make the offense look worse, and vice versa. So I think from a talent perspective, if you plug holes at just a couple spots or even one spot, it could make the whole operation look a whole lot better. So I don't think that this roster, I still think this is a really good roster. I think it opened the season as the league's best roster. Obviously, they have a lot of guys hurt right now, so that might be up for debate. We're going to see how good the 49ers depth is. But I don't think that they should approach the trade deadline thinking, oh my God, there are so many holes to fill everywhere. That's just not the case. I think that you approach the trade deadline saying, specifically, this could get better and that could help everything else in a domino effect. That's the way that I look at this current 49ers team.
And you can't plug every hole. You just cannot.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's not the way. This is not the baseball trade deadline, and even then, they can't plug every hole there. You got to target it. You got to believe in what you have, and then also what you can supplement with. And they do believe in this roster. Obviously, there's injuries. There is understandably fans do not love the talent level of the offensive line other than at left tackle. I get it. I mentioned it myself. I don't understand why they don't draft offensive linemen more often. I think Kyle and Chris Forster are really picky about their offensive linemen, and they think they can develop guys over a couple years that doesn't cost them a first, second, or third round pick. This is what they believe. It's not going to change now. It's not going to, you know what? Now we're going to trade a first round pick for an offensive line. They just don't, that's not their philosophy, and has got them a lot of victories. And they can invest their first and second round picks in other positions, namely defensive lineman, receiver. We know where they invest. I just don't see them changing that way they look at it. It's going to be defensive line. It's going to be edge, and it's going to be receiver if they do. We know they traded for Emmanuel Sanders in 2019, and that really helped them as a rental. It was not a cheap one, but it helped them and get the Super Bowl. And he was open for potentially game winnings, at least go ahead touchdown in the Super Bowl. That's where they believe in investment. They're not trading picks for a safety, or not trading, at least they haven't traded picks for a cornerback. They just don't believe in that stuff. It's the way they built this roster. It's an incredibly talented roster. It's going to be defensive end, maybe defensive tackle, because they are thin there after the Hargrave injury, and receiver. That's what they do. They're not trading. I understood the discussion about trading for a running back when McCaffrey was out. They don't believe in that. They traded for McCaffrey because he's one of the best players
because
in
that's
football.
McCaffrey. Yeah, it's a Hall of Fame.
They just don't believe in trading picks. They draft them and they don't get great players in the third round in running backs, but they don't believe in trading for veteran running backs. Kyle believes he can just get one out there. Matt Breida has been mentioned many times by me. They have not picked him up, but I believe he's out there in case they are really in an emergency, and they're going to wait for McCaffrey to get back. If we get word McCaffrey's out for another month, might be different, but I think they really do believe he's coming back within 2 or 3 weeks, and then we'll see where they are.
And you mentioned the secondary, the cornerback position. It just made me think that position group is looking really strong. This is probably the deepest they've had under Shanahan and Lynch. And Charvarius Ward played a good game against the Chiefs. That's been a big point of concern because he's been on and off the injury report. He worked out before the Seattle game but couldn't go. That's when the rookie Renardo Green stepped up big. Now Renardo Green seems to have taken over for Isaac Yiadom as the third corner. He got most of the snaps against the Chiefs. So that's looking really, really good for the 49ers. Lenore is playing at a high level. Charvarius Ward was an all-pro last year coming off his best game, and they feel good enough about Renardo Green to take not a starting spot, I wouldn't say, but he comes in as an outside cornerback and nickel, and Diomedor Lenore moves inside. It's safety that's a little bit more tenuous with Hufanga out, and you're starting Malik Mustafa, who's a total missile, by the way, but he did
Mm-hmm.
miss 3 tackles. So you're going to play the high ceiling, low floor game until he can find a way to bring up the floor. I'm not quite sure how I feel about Jair Brown as a long term prospect at safety yet. He's done some good things. He seems to have a bit of a nose for the football, but he's also been beaten a few times. So safety, I think, is more tenuous than cornerback, which is a change for the 49ers. In the past, they'd been A-OK, veterans at safety, ready to go, and corners always where we talked about the depth being a little thin. I think it's the other way around now. They've got to figure out that safety position down the stretch.
Yeah, they have youth there. I think they feel good about those guys. If Hufanga comes back, when he comes back, I think they will feel pretty comfortable there. I think they just like the talent, the speed of Jair Brown, and the speed and power of Mustafa. And they're just not going to invest anything more. They certainly aren't trading for a safety. They just don't do that.
Well, they have
They
Adrian
signed him.
Amos on the practice squad. He's a
Yep, yep,
longtime vet. So if,
yeah.
if they're in a bind, he could be like the Tashawn Gibson that they kind of plug in there. Who
Exactly.
could
That's
probably
how
get
they
away
do
with
it
it.
at safety. I will say my favorite thing is Malik Mustafa. It was a fourth round pick. How did they get that fourth round pick, David? Do you remember?
That was Trey Lance,
Trey
Malik
Lance.
Mustafa,
Unbelievable that they got a fourth round pick from the Cowboys,
who's
got
now
rid
a
of the
starter.
salary. They got rid of the salary and got a fourth round pick when we all assumed they would have to cut Trey Lance and have to pay that salary because first round pick salaries are guaranteed. And they got a fourth round pick and they got a very useful safety in his rookie year who will only get better. Incredible trade. Like when Jerry Jones gets on the radio and starts bragging about all these great moves he's made, and it's no, it's Jerry, whatever, it's his personality, but like how smart he is, how many great things he's done. This roster is not great right now. And they traded a fourth round pick to the 49ers, who they've got a starting safety who can probably play in this league for 5 to 7 years. That's a good move. 49ers have missed some things in the past, missed a lot of things in the draft. They hit with that one, and unbelievable. They got a fourth round pick for Trey Lance.
And I don't think people understood how good a value they got in return
Well,
because they were so focused on what they paid to get Trey Lance. But that's sunk cost fallacy. You can't worry
no,
about what you paid in 2021. Once they got to 2023, the past is the past. You've got to do what's best for you moving
they were going
forward.
to.
What's the
They were
optimal
going
move
to.
there?
They were going to cut him. I mean, it was
Yeah.
going to cut him, and he was going to count against the cap because that salary counted. You got off that salary, and you got something for it, and then you've turned that into something very playable. And he might turn out to be a very good player. Unbelievable. And as I always say, maybe I'm just defending him, but if you said right now, would you trade those 3 first round picks for Brock Purdy? And if you didn't have them, yes, they would trade those 3 first round picks for Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
They would love
No,
to have those
absolutely.
picks back. Micah Parsons was taken with the pick when that got rerouted to Dallas with one of those picks. Yes, that would be better with that, but they got their starting quarterback. And so it all is the big picture. It all is every move counts. And to have Brock Purdy as your quarterback and to have Malik Mustafa for Trey Lance, that's a plus side for the 49ers. There are losses. They've had losses in personnel decisions. Those are 2 wins.
So we have a question now from Jason. Good teams historically can run the ball on third and fourth and short, even when everyone knows they are going to run. How come the Niners cannot run behind Trent and pick up yardage anymore? Well, it's not Trent Williams' fault if you watch most of these runs. It's because, again, watch the ones where they got stuffed this weekend, and it's the interior that's getting pushed back. And if the middle gets pushed back, then it screws up all the other angles, even if you're trying to run left or right. You have to be solid across the entire front, especially if you're facing goal line defenses that are gambling on that run. So it also didn't help that they didn't execute in the pass game because that loosens things up. But I think this question is specifically about the third and fourth and shorts that the 49ers have really struggled with. And I think it goes back to getting just blasted on the interior. And they were facing, it wasn't just Chris Jones this past game. Mike Pennell, the defensive tackle number 69 for the Chiefs, before the game, the 49ers were talking about him as one of the best run stoppers in football. Brendel held him on that second down play at the start of the game, which I think told me it was going to be a long day for the run game when I saw that. And the 49ers just didn't handle it well in the middle. So they're going to have to find a way to handle it better, maybe moving the quarterback off his spot, some pitches outside. But the Chiefs were just so good, flowing.
Yeah.
Those linebackers are so Leo Chenal, so Bolton, so athletic, flowing with outside zone. They couldn't do that either. You got to win at the point of attack, though. You have to win in the middle, or at least hold serve in the middle so the whole play doesn't blow up.
Yeah, I can see Feliciano moving in and play the starting center. That's what I can see that move. I think that's the physical mismatch they have on the line. Banks, I don't think he's having a great year, but he's physically, he's a real NFL guard. I think obviously Pooney's been very good. I didn't really
It's been
watch
an
the film, but
upgrade, yeah.
yeah. Pooney's fine at right guard. McKivitz is what he is at right tackle. He's going to get beat on some stuff, but I think he's playable. I think the center spot has been a problem, and Feliciano is not a great NFL center, but he can play it. He's filled in other spots. I think that might be a move. Maybe not this week. We'll see, but after the bye. I mean, if you're talking about little moves that they can make, that's one. And I think we're seeing D Winters basically take over for Devontae Campbell to be the will, which means you play even when there's three wideouts. He's certainly been solid as a strong side, which means you come in when it's a base, when there's a tight end and a fullback. He deserves those snaps. I think we're in Bernardo Green coming in as the third corner. Like, we're seeing these moves now. And I think maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to look up and go, okay, that's a little bit different 49er team than I was used to. They're making some of these adjustments, and then we'll see what happens at the trade deadline.
Yeah. Going to be fascinating stuff. It's on November 5th this year. It's a week later than it has been in the past, but it again lines up with the 49ers bye week, which, remember, last year they picked up Chase Young, and that was on the bye week. And it's funny how differently these seasons have gone, but the 49ers, if they win this week especially, they'll be in a very similar position as they were in all past 3 seasons, because they lost 3 in a row at this time last year. So they were 5-3, and they were leaking oil at this
Yeah.
time last year. But bye week happened. They traded for Chase Young. He actually had a really strong first game for them against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that's when the 49ers turned it around. So this is, regardless of how they get there, this is a team that hovers around 500 historically, maybe a little bit below, maybe a little bit above at that bye week, and they've had that bye week the past couple seasons right at the end of October, Tim. And then historically, I know you've written about this before, they do turn it on in November. And the question is, can they do that again this time? What extra pieces might give them a little bit of a boost? But the track record is the track record, and 49ers have played really, really good football in November, essentially throughout the entirety of Shanahan's tenure after they've installed a competent quarterback.
Well, isn't that point? Physical team wears other teams down. When it gets cold, they don't, aren't dependent on throwing the ball 45 times. Play tough defense. Stick it out. Was it be better longer? And that's a Shanahan thing. And that doesn't just mean 4 quarters of a football game. It means the entirety of a regular season. And they really do believe in it. It's resulted in that way many times. We've seen it be better in December than you were in September. Time and again, the 49ers have done this. We shall see if they do it. The other thing they've got going forward is the NFC West isn't running away from them. Like, they're right there in the NFC West. That win on, not that Thursday night game in Seattle was huge, because they can sweep the Seahawks now and have that tiebreaker advantage. They are only a game back right now, and with the win in hand against the Seahawks, it's really less than a game. They just got to get past the Seahawks. If they can get past the Seahawks, and the other, Cardinals and the Rams don't come up from behind them or tied with them right now, they're in the playoffs. Like, that's the goal. Like, you heard that from Shanahan. It wasn't we're going for the 1 seed. It wasn't we're going for a whole advantage in the whole super. No, it's let's win the division, and it's right there in front. Even if they lose, it would be really bad, and we would be writing some very tough stuff if they lose on Sunday. But even if they lose, they're not out of it. It's the blessings of being in a mediocre NFC West this season. The NFC West has been super strong in some years. It is not super strong this year. I think the 49ers have every belief that they can beat the Seahawks again at Levi's November 17. They do that, they would have a major, major edge in this race for a playoff spot. And then you're at worst the 4th seed if you win NFC West. I think the 49ers are aiming for that in a kind of a modified way to look at this season. And I think it's fair for them to look at it that way if they don't suffer more injuries than just win on Sunday. Secondly, David, I'll say with this bye coming up, can you see Kyle Shanahan making a move at special teams? Brian Schneider's been there for a couple of years now. We know it was bad with Richard Hightower before that. I don't know that I'm hearing Kyle, give hosannas for Brian Schneider these days. We're seeing mistakes. We're seeing some good plays too. They stopped the fake punt, which is what they could not do against the Rams. But I don't know who it would be, but at some point, error after error, yet a big punt return. We saw, they on Sunday, they do this. They give up kickoff returns. The kicker has to make the tackle. They're so bad in coverage. The kicker gets hurt back-to-back games. At least they survived this game without getting our kicker hurt. Can you see the 49ers making a move at special teams, Coach?
But I mean, Mitch Wishnowsky was there in the line of fire on the punt
Yes.
return, so that was a danger. I know they worked out a punter yesterday, but they work out punters throughout the year. People, I think, were reading a little too much into that. The crazy thing to me is that Brian Schneider was with Seattle for a decade, and he was a good. I mean, he had great results in Seattle. They had a good special teams unit. And I asked Richard Sherman about him when the 49ers hired him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, great coach, great coach." And then obviously the special teams hasn't, especially this year, it's been a problem. I think there's only been one game where there hasn't been a massive special teams gaffe for the 49ers. So, some of it could be personnel, young guys whiffing, young guys not really, following exactly what the plan is. But if it's happening on a week in, week out basis at different spots, right? One week it's the punt defense or the fake punt defense. The other week it's the kick coverage. They haven't gotten much, if at all, from their return game. Then you can't blame individual players, and obviously the blame would then go to the coordinator. So it's a really interesting situation for me. The last time the 49ers changed the coordinator at special teams, it was after the season. That was after the 2021 season. And we've obviously drawn some parallels between now and 2021. The special teams ranks even worse now than it did then. The worst ranked team in 2021, the only team that was in the playoffs that was ranked worse than the 49ers on special teams, was the Green Bay Packers. And then we saw special teams essentially win the game for the 49ers in the playoffs against the Packers when they blocked the punt. So it's something that the 49ers just have to get to mediocrity, right? Shouldn't be that much to ask for. Just get it to a place where it's not losing games. Doesn't have to win you games. Just get it to a point where it's not losing games. And, I hadn't put much thought to if they might make a drastic move at the bye week until you just said that right now. But if there's another game-breaking play that goes against the 49ers on special teams, it's definitely decision time over the course of the bye week.
You almost have to do it symbolically. I don't know what you're telling your players if you're losing games, not all the way losing, but if you are making grievous errors week after week on the special teams and you keep the coach. I mean, I don't even know who they would play. So I want to point that out. I also want to point out that Kyle Shanahan is the number one, responsibility for all of this, for everything that goes on with the team. And he's publicly doesn't care about special teams. He just don't screw it up. Don't mess up my offense and my defense. They are doing the exact opposite. They are messing up everything. But I think when you have a head coach who does not put much faith and commitment and resources into the special teams, although they do have acquired special teams kind of players. But if the coach doesn't care much about it, if he's not thinking about fake punts and fake field goals, and he's not into the whole strategy of special teams, that could pervade throughout. And you know what? Maybe, the guy running down there, Tatum Bethune, is not quite locked in. It's a marginal thing. I know I'm not trying to say that's the reason, but overall, if your boss doesn't care if you do certain thing exactly at 9 a.m. every day, then you stop doing it at 9 a.m. every day. If you know that, your wife doesn't necessarily care if you forget to buy the apples in the grocery store, you don't buy the apples in the grocery store sometimes. I think there's some of that going on with this team, and it's leading to the exact thing that Shanahan doesn't want. He just wants them, like you say, to be neutral. He just wants them to not screw up the game. And by thinking that, they are screwing up the game. It's a weird little conundrum they've got. And I don't know if changing the coordinator is the fix for it. I just think I don't know how you look at Nick Bosa and George Kittle and Fred Warner and Deebo Samuel in the face if there's a huge special teams blunder while they're on the sideline that loses the game on Sunday. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, because it's happened so many times.
Huge plays.
Massive plays. They got a little bit better when they first hired Schneider in 2022. That was the 49ers' best team under Shanahan as far as all the metrics, the balance of the team. They had the number one offense and the number one defense by the end of the year. And then the special teams was right where Kyle Shanahan wants it to be. They were at number 15. right in the middle. They're not going to screw it up
Yes,
at number
yes,
15.
yes, number
And
15.
you know what happened? Brock Purdy tore up his elbow. Hassan
Yep.
Reddick got him. And, it's just, that's too bad for the 49ers. But now you got to think about what do they need with this team? Well, I don't know if the offense is going to get back to number one this year. Maybe when Christian McCaffrey returns, they're top three offense again, but they don't have Ayuk anymore. And I mean, you probably realistically think about this as a top 5 to 7 offense at their ceiling this year, just because of the injuries. You could probably realistically, the defense has been better. You could probably say they're going to sneak into the top 10 if the 49ers can do everything right and right the ship. So you'll have you have the resources to have a top 10 and offense and a top 10 defense, but that means that the special teams has to be, at worst 15. It can't be this terrible unit. You might be able to get away with it if you've got top 3 on both offense and defense like you did in 2022, but you can't get away with it when things are leaking oil and when this is going to be a quote unquote season from hell. And I think when you wrote season from hell, you weren't saying this is a lost cause.
No.
The 49ers are just going to have to go about it the really hard way. It's not going to come easily or seemingly easily like it did in some of those other years. And that means that every single bit of the margins matters. And that includes special teams.
Yeah, and we go to the Rams game, huge problems. We go even the Vikings game, which I don't know they win otherwise, but block punt. Like there's just you just can't just be able to this one that time, this time, and in a team that is not playing well. That it's just it's a pile on. And again, what the fix is, I don't know. The kicking situation obviously is up in the air. Missed extra point. That's hard to pin on the coordinator when you're just pulling another kicker out of the off the street. But this is an ongoing problem. I think fans have every right to complain about it. And we're just watching. I asked, like, who will ask about it? We ask about it. We ask Kyle about it. What can we do? We can't draft players for him. We can ask about it, how it's going to be addressed. And there's been some tick-ups. They made some decent special teams play. We mentioned stopping the fake punt. We mentioned there's been, some good downing the ball, on punts inside the 5. But those should be regular. They shouldn't be able, oh, my God, they made a play there. It should be regular. And the mistakes should not be as consistent as that we're seeing. Just terrible. That punt return was terrible. Guys were falling down, all over the place, and they give up a punt return that they could not afford to give up.
Yeah, it's like the Red Sea parted. There wasn't, it wasn't difficult at
all.
All they had to have.
Like, right, he was caught on the left side, and then he just ran up the left side.
I get that happening in college where you have a really fast guy, and it's okay. Well, he's faster than everybody else on the field. So, but everybody in the NFL is fast. So guys, for a guy to be in that much free open space, there has to be a lot that went schematically wrong, right? Like it shouldn't look like a college game at the NFL level, but it did there. We got 2 more minutes and one more question, Tim. Should we try to squeeze this one in?
Let's get the last question in. We got the multiple Silvers still.
So yeah, it's from multiple Mike Silvers. A big complaint that I saw from after the Kansas City game was that Kansas City was Kyle Shanahan was not able to scheme the wide receiver open, but Andy Reid was able to without his best wide receiver. Is that something that Shanahan would have to do on the fly in a game, or are those plays on his sheet? First off, Mahomes' rating was 44.4.
Yeah, it wasn't like
Mahomes threw for 150 yards. Like Andy Reid wasn't really scheming guys wide open downfield either. What I think that the Chiefs did better is they ran the ball better. And yes, they did execute some screens and short passes better. So I think if there's a critique of Shanahan, Jordan Mason has 10 catches so far this year after all that work on the jugs machine. 49ers probably, when they talk about going back to the basics this week, maybe a little more West Coast, short passing basics. to open some of the stuff up that Andy Reid was able to open up, but it still wasn't a prolific offensive game for the Chiefs.
Yep, and you're not redoing your scheme in the middle of the game. That definitely not Kyle Shanahan. He's not drawing up stuff in the dirt. He's got his scheme. He's got his plays. Some things you go to more than you others, or you see some things and you react to. But he's a set you up, and then we're going to do something that while you try to counteract it. He has not done great on that this season, or specifically against the Chiefs for the last several seasons. And we talked about this Spagnuolo factor. There's something about the Spagnuolo defense and these players. Let's give credit. These cornerbacks are good. It's tough to beat these guys. Trent McDuffie is a really good cornerback, and he is always on top of the 49ers receivers. The pass rush is tough, but it's a matter of Kyle Shanahan believing in what he does, believing in how he does it, believing that it's going to work. It has not done that against the Chiefs, but I believe against a lesser defense like the Cowboys, and there are others coming up on the schedule, and there's tough games coming up too. But we've seen it. We've seen him go into a big game against the Cowboys. We've seen him go into a big game, as you mentioned, against the Rams. You've seen him going certainly against the Eagles last year during the regular season, where he has figured out what he does, and then he's going to do counters to you trying to react to it. Does not seem to work against the Chiefs, which again is something to remember. But I'm not taking one game against the Chiefs where you don't have most of your top three wideouts and saying that's it, it's over. Change everything. He's going to do what he does, and
fire everybody.
Fire everybody. And what he does is what everybody in the league wants to do. That's everybody in the league is trying to do the Kyle Shanahan thing. That should be a tip to somebody that this is a really good scheme. He's just got to figure out certain things, and he hasn't had McCaffrey this year.
He hasn't. All right, everybody go to sfstandard.com. Check it out. Tim and I, we are the first members of the sports section there, and it's been going on now for about a month. So got a lot of articles up, more coming. Big week for the 49ers. It's Cowboys week, so sfstandard.com, and then all the social media that accompanies it is something that you should give a follow. Anyway, Tim, thanks. This was fun. We'll probably reconvene here in a couple of weeks.
All right, David. Good as always.
All right. We'll see you soon. Take care, guys.